Name displayed, Callie Cleary. Name tag, Rwanda Garth McCullough, ATD, she, her. Rwanda smiles.
Hi, folks that are starting to trickle in. My name is Tia. We will be getting started here shortly as folks are filing in.
Text, H. Ray Keith. T. L. Notary number 1, then H. Ray Keith. Sits in front of a blue wall, white fireplace behind him.
Again, if you're just joining us, we'll get started here soon. Looks like folks are slowly coming in here. My name is Tia. I'm excited to be here with y'all today.
Title, Achieving the Dream Teaching and Learning Institute. Below the title, a group of students wearing safety goggles are in a lab.
All right, looks like the numbers have started to slow down. So hello again, everyone. My name is Tia. I'm from Intentional Futures, and I'm excited to be here with you all and explain this recently released tool and what we are doing today together. We're hoping we'll have a great time with us.
Title slide, Equity Review Tool.
Next slide. Thank you. So today's session is around a newly released, and I'm going to emphasize draft here, in that this is a document that we just released today, and it is a working document. And so this is going to be a really cool tool that many folks that are in this room from ATD and from IF, the company that I work for, have worked on together. And really what this guide does is shows instructional staff, teacher, faculty, folks that are, teaching students, really just how to go through a process to create your materials that are more equity centered. And so what we're going to go through today is a little bit about the tool. Then we're going to kind of get our hands dirty and go into some breakout rooms and have a conversation, go a little bit deeper into that. So I'm going to pass it off over to Ray. Introduce who we have here today.
Thanks, Tia. I'm Ray Keith, Program Development Consultant with Achieving the Dream, and I want to introduce our amazing team and my esteemed colleagues. So we have Dr. Rwanda Garth McCullough, Director and Program Development at ATD, Tynan Gable, who is a lead strategist, social impact at IF. And then we have Tia Holiday, who's introduced herself. She's Associate Director of Post-Secondary Education at IF. Sarah Kennison, Program Development Consultant with Achieving the Dream, and Joy Shibata, who's a visual designer at IF. And so excited to be here with you all. And so we're going to ask that you as participants put your name and your institution in the chat. We really want to get to know you as we're spending this hour and a half together. And so we would like to know who's in the room with us as well.
Slide title, Agenda.
And then our agenda for today is we'll do some background and framing. We'll do an overview of the equity review tool. We'll do some critical introspection. We have a breakout room activity, and then we'll have our closing and share out some upcoming events that you can participate in with Achieving the Dream. So thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Rwanda and Tynan.
Thank you, Ray. So, Oh, sorry. Tia, Tia's going to share the intentions first. Sorry. Got excited.
It's no worries. So today our intentions are to share an overview of this tool, and I'm going to again emphasize this is a draft version. One of the reasons we're having this session is to get some like live feedback around this, gather feedback on the equity review process. Is it useful? Is it not useful? How do we make this tool stronger? And then just get your recommendations for the next version of the tool that we are hoping to come out soonish.
The diagram shows partner organizations at a central hub.
Thank you, Tia. So the creation of the equity review tool originated through a collaboration of the Every Learner Everywhere network that both Achieving the Dream and Intentional Futures are partners in, along with 11 other organizations who share our drive to advance equity by transforming post-secondary teaching and learning experiences. Our collective mission is to help institutions use technology to innovate teaching and learning with the ultimate goal of improving student outcomes for Black, Latinx, Indigenous, poverty-affected, and first-generation students. Every Learner Everywhere works with colleges to build capacity to improve student outcomes with digital learning through services, technical assistance, and resource guides.
Equity, purpose, and goals have images.
Which brings us to the history of how ATD and IF came to develop the equity review tool that we will be sharing with you today, that we're so excited, hot off the presses, with this review draft for you to get your feedback on. Because ultimately this tool is for you, is for how you would use it and what you would use it for, and we're so excited to get your sense of it. But as you can imagine, when working with multiple organizations, the resource design process can be an interesting endeavor, to say the least. So most start with identifying an asset that we need to design for the field that can be used to assess, inform, or guide practice. However, the development process for this tool took a different path. The equity review tool was originally developed for internal use only, and in response to a need to define and articulate our expectations for equity for the Every Learner Everywhere network. So shortly after forming the network, we sat around and
Glasses.
Brought everyone together from multiple cities and developed equity principles to guide our internal and external work. We committed to these principles that include articulating a specific focus on racial equity and equity for poverty-affected students, in optimistic, anti-deficit, and sustainable ways, while consistently reflecting on our own biases and positionalities. Broadening the participation of people, partners, and perspectives to reflect the students and institutions we serve, and disaggregating data to the finest point possible and resisting the erasure of Native American, Asian American, and Pacific Islander students. Once the network adopted these equity principles, the question became, how can we put them into practice in our own resource development process to ensure that the tools and the guides we put out in the field on digital learning reflect our focus and commitment to racial and economic equity? At first, an equity review round was added to our resource development and review process. And this round consists of asking a few equity-minded network members, usually the same BIPOC staff from the participating organizations, to read it over, with 1 or 2 days time before we needed to, go to design, which, as you can imagine, only allotted time to flag the egregious issues, identify misuses of what I call equity gloss, or throw what Tia refers, or spread through what Tia refers to as equity paint on fully formed text. So needless to say, we quickly became frustrated by this hurried and ineffective process. So when the network had an opportunity to experience Dr. Stella Ben-Simone's document review process, it sparked the idea in a few of us of developing a guide for our authors and reviewers to ensure that we were working from common standards in terms of approach, process, scope, framing, and language. So after this guide was developed, and we all thanks to the team that worked on developing that initial guide, I personally felt that what we had developed for internal use was so strong that it needed to be shared with the field, since what I was seeing out in the field through my coaching and work at ATD is that many people were in need of a process for
Slide displays.
For asset development, resource development, and especially in the instructional space. So many of us are in this time trying to figure out how to intentionally design equity-based resources in the different forms. So I will now turn over to Tynan, who will share the purpose and goals of this draft version of the tool.
New presenter appears.
Yeah, thanks, Rhonda. So as Rhonda said, we found a lot of value in kind of the internal process and tools that we set up for ourselves, and felt that there was a lot of kind of transferability between what we had established for ourselves internally and what folks within our network were seeing as kind of a big need in the field. And we know that we've heard a lot from faculty and institutional staff in general that there's a big need for more actionable tools and more ways to go today and implement equity-minded practices in the classroom. And so the purpose of this tool is really to provide guidance for the development of materials specifically in a way that amplifies minoritized and marginalized voices, supports optimal learning by improving equity in the classroom, specifically through the production of materials and resources that you're going to use in the classroom that are going to be equity-centered and equity-minded. So our goal here, and as you'll see as we walk through kind of the different components of the tool, and we'll share the full tool with you here in a little bit, is to promote the use of intentional language, intentional processes within your institution as you're developing resources to make sure that students who have been historically marginalized are centered throughout that process, and thinking about the language that we're using and the resources we're creating, and making sure that those are set up in a way that's centering those students' needs.
Chapter 1, Critical Introspection.
And so this just is a really quick snapshot of what you'll see in the tool. So it's broken up into 3 big chapters. The first chapter is really, it's about self-reflection. It's about understanding the perspectives that you bring to this work, your positionality, and how to shift your mindset to a strengths-based perspective and mindset, so that you're understanding where your students are coming from and seeing where you can better meet their needs. The second chapter is focused on the development of your resources, your materials that you're going to be creating for your classes. And so there's a series of tools and steps within that second chapter that will guide you through how to develop equity-minded materials and resources. And then the last chapter talks about processes and best practices for continuous improvement of your materials. And with that, Sarah, I'm going to pass it off to you to just give a little bit more context about what this tool contains.
Thank you, Tynan. So we'd like to go over the general structure of the guide to support you in using it independently, and of course with your team of fellow educators and students beyond the time of the workshop. As Tynan mentioned, there are 3 main chapters that cover, in a nutshell, who you are, considering the materials you'll be developing, and engaging in continuous improvement. So each chapter begins with the main ideas for course improvement and steps for achieving your goals. Then you'll have the opportunity to work through actionable strategies. And for example, in chapter 1, the actionable strategies are: understand your own positionality, shift to a strengths-based perspective, and get to know your students. Again, as Tynan mentioned. So the chapter will begin with the actionable strategies. Next, there are a set of reflection questions in each chapter. As with much of the work we recommend with equity, we encourage you to take a deep dive into the questions with others to help bring in various perspectives and backgrounds, and also to encourage rich dialogue around equity throughout your department or institution. That's what those reflection questions are there for. For example, in chapter 1, 2 reflection questions are: 1, well, these are reflection topics. Regularly identify and check your own biases, assumptions, privilege, and power. And 2, identify actionable ways developed or revised materials can authentically incorporate perspectives, knowledge, practices, and experiences for marginalized communities. Finally, each chapter ends with recommended readings, since we're all on a continuous journey to continue our own learning to become the optimal educators we hope to be. And I think in these recommended readings, I also here added examples of reflection questions. So let's see. Anyway, we all know what recommended readings are. And of course, we all want to continue our the process of iterating these materials and developing them into more equity-minded materials that can support equitable practices. So that's where the resources for further learning come in. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So just a couple of highlights of specific components of the tool that we think are really useful. The first is we have a glossary up front, and this is not novel, but it's something that we felt really strongly about and worked really hard to come up with definitions that would help users of the tool and us as authors make sure that we're really on the same page in terms of how we're using the language that we're using, kind of just in service of this overall goal of being really intentional with language and what it means and how it's being used. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, in the second chapter, it really dives into specific actionable steps for creating materials for your classes. And one of the things that we've included in there, and this was inspired and informed by Dr. Ben Simone's work, is an equity language guide. And this goes really deep into specific language of words that you want to refrain from using and instead what to use, and with some notes for why in some cases, just to help you kind of shift the way that you're talking about things to be more strengths-based and equity-minded. All right, Tia, passing it back to you.
Text, get to know your students.
Cool. And so myself and pretty soon here, Ray, are going to go into really what chapter 1 does. And so in the first chapter, the team felt really strongly that before we even start diving into creating materials, and as an educator, I feel that urge, we really need to set the foundation, right? We need to be introspective. And so in the first chapter, we're setting a foundation of how to meaningfully engage in the development process before we even pick up a pen or hop on the computer to create those, right? And so how do we create and how do we cultivate our own equity-minded perspective? So in the chapters, it provides an initial guidance for how to, of how it's related to how everything works. And then it's important that we're actively working through each of the steps. And I say this at the top again to say, I know that we'll want to step into chapter 2, but I really encourage folks to get into chapter 1 so that we can understand our own positionality and recognize where we need to strengthen our materials. And so we have to avoid using, negative language. We have to make sure that we're using strengths-based language and really understand where did that language come from in the first place. And I will say for myself, I've had to unlearn some things myself that I have learned. And so as a woman who identifies as Black female, I definitely know what it's like to undo and have to do all of these processes. And so I'm going to pass it off to Ray to go a little bit deeper into chapter 1.
Great, thanks, Tia. So I'm going to walk you through the 3 steps within this chapter, and we'll share an aligned strategy application that supports your learning and understanding of getting through this first chapter and setting the foundation. And as you engage with this tool, we really want you to be mindful that each step of the chapter builds on one another and also creating a foundation for intentionality. So it's really important that we not skip steps of the process so that we can engage in this work with fidelity. So step 1 focuses on knowing yourself. And in this particular step, faculty must be aware of how their own worldview, social, cultural, and lived experiences and positionality inform their educational materials, content, and curriculum that they design and that they choose. And as an equity-minded practitioner, this approach of knowing yourself includes recognizing the opportunity and potential to create or redesign course materials that validate, affirm, and value students' cultures, lived experiences, and identities of the students that you truly serve. And so 2 strategies to support the development in this area is to regularly identify and check your own biases, assumptions, privilege, and power, and then identify actionable ways to develop and revise material that can authentically incorporate knowledge, practices, and ways of learning from racialized and marginalized communities. And so in step 2, we shift to a
Title, Chapter 1.
Strength-based perspective. And so this step requires us to interrogate how we might think about our students and to honor the community, cultural wealth, funds, and knowledge, and the prior learning that they bring into educational spaces to then inform the design and revision of course materials through an asset-based lens and an asset-based approach. So one of the strategy applications for this step is to practice creating and reinforcing teaching and learning practices where students are consistently encouraged and welcome to contribute their voices, perspectives, resources, knowledge, and talents into the course. And with step 3, this is about getting to know your students. And what does that look like in practice? We often use quantitative data, demographic data to get to know our students and who they might be. As we take an equity-minded approach of knowing our students, we really should allow students to provide data about themselves and data that's important to them. And so how are we collecting that data? How are we getting to know our students at the beginning of a semester and building that community and building rapport? We might want to do some intake surveys, but thinking about the types of questions that we're asking that truly get to know our students in a meaningful way. And this requires intentionality and creating spaces of trust and authenticity. And this step also can support you in creating and redesigning curriculum that is meaningful to your students. And so the strategy application for this particular step is to focus on understanding the experiences, emotions, and motivations students bring into the classroom. And so I hope that this overview of setting the foundation will guide you as we move into our breakout rooms. And as we move into our breakout rooms, we'll be examining key components of the equity tool. We would like your perspective and feedback as it relates to applications, gaps, and how you might engage with this tool. And then think about those next steps. We'll also be using a Jamboard in the breakout room to provide so that you can provide us with your recommendations. And then we'll have some guiding questions to inform the conversation and discussion. And as you return to the larger group, please be prepared to share out what you experienced as it relates to the tool. Tia is putting the links to the toolkit in our chat. And then we're going to move into breakout rooms for about, I think about 25 minutes.
Title, Equity Review Guide.
And so Tynan's going to shift us to our breakout room activity.
Just want to confirm that folks are able to access that link before we move into breakout rooms. Thumbs down if you're not,
Photo, person writing in a notebook.
or thumbs up if you are. Thank you, Margaret.
New presenter.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms.
Text, breakout room, activity. The person looks at the camera.
Welcome back, everybody.
Scene change.
Think we're all back. So I hope you all had some great conversations in your breakout rooms. And I know that we had a great time and it went very quickly. And so this is an opportunity for us now to share out what we learned and what we talked about in our breakout rooms. And so I want us to start with, let's start with chapter 3 and have folks share out how they engage with this tool and what were some thoughts that they had in regards to maybe some of the highlights of the tool, and then where some opportunities for us to make some changes to the tool.
For chapter 3, step 8, student feedback.
Yes.
Speaker name, Sarah Kreischen. Sarah rests her chin in her hand.
Did you all have an opportunity to appoint someone to share out initially, or we didn't either? We didn't either. So I just realized that. So anyone from
But we have a lot of really bright minds.
all righty, take.
I will say there was a request for a rubric. So I know that's something that we also talked about as a team. So there was a request for a rubric. More of the moving from the what to the how, more of those, more examples, which we have already talked about a little bit as well.
Name label, Sarah Kreinson, she, her.
Yeah, I'm just doing a quick overview of the board here, Sarah.
Yeah, some people talked about the importance of the equity language guide, so everyone can be on the same page in the conversation, which is an important use for that tool, while others were saying that sometimes language changes quickly. So you want to be aware of that in the conversation with other educators.
Sarah Kreinson.
I would like to take a moment to see if other folks in our group would like to share too.
The new speaker wears headphones. Text, Caitlin.
I think that one of the most important things that we talked about was, one of the things that I like was humanizing the student and making sure that we see the student as an individual. We see the student not necessarily as the number. And so like whenever the student is not necessarily performing the way that you want, make sure that you contact them
Caitlin
and
smiles.
kind of guide them in order to complete their work instead of chastising them in order to get them to do their work.
Scene changes.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin.
Can someone in our group, I loved the way several people talked about the student-faculty relationship and how that can really open up space for student feedback. Can somebody please talk about that?
Name, Amy Blum.
I know, Rob, you're a strong contender. Amy, go ahead.
Talked about authenticity and showing, I think that was in our room, authenticity and showing who we are as human beings ourselves, and showing that we're fallible, and not being afraid of making jokes and making fun of ourselves, and letting them know who we are, and our own flops in life and things like that.
Sarah touches her nose.
It's a form of relationship building and building trust.
Name of person speaking, Rob.
Great. And Rob?
So one of the things that I brought up in our meeting is over the pandemic, I developed an assignment that I call the Teams Hello. And it's just if you use Teams, if you use Zoom, whatever. But the point is that as a college, we use Teams. And so as an assignment in the first couple of days of the class, I have them message me directly on Teams, which does a couple of things. I now know that they know how to use Teams and message me directly. I also think using things like direct messages is less formal than email. And so it can invite students a little bit more to hit you with like really quick questions that they know you can get back to later. It also gives you an opportunity to just be like, okay, and why are you in the class? How are things going? What's life like for you? Do you have kids? When are your best times to meet? It's a great time to point out that you have availability outside of office hours, because I'm pretty sure most of us do that. We probably don't stick to a raw 3 hours a week that we're available to students, and then the rest of the time it's nothing. And so it's opening up that channel in an informal way and inviting that direct conversation with you. And then also inviting them to continually use that avenue throughout the semester.
Great. Thanks, Rob.
Amy Blum appears.
We also talked about some specific tools to gather student feedback throughout the semester, whether that be anonymous surveys or Google Docs or something like that, where they can compile feedback or something like that, and with a focus on safety and anonymity.
Great.
Well,
Yeah,
and just
go ahead, Kate.
sorry, just adding, not just collecting feedback, but we could also do things like collect different department materials. So if you develop something that is
Caitlin uses hands.
extremely useful and you did a great job with equity, and this is a really good example, we should have kind of a folder with those things, just so everybody can either see how to do it or maybe even use those resources themselves.
Caitlin gestures.
I appreciate you all having a deep conversation about how to use those surveys and thinking about doing that throughout the semester. Many times, in higher education, we get our course evaluations and also get limited responses to that, which really can't inform what we're going to do in our next semester, or even how students experience the course. And so getting that student feedback throughout the semester is really key.
H. Ray Keith in front of a blue wall.
Sean, I think you have your students kind of participate like in student feedback.
Sarah gestures.
Like there's the idea of creating student feedback tools, but can you talk a little, if you would like to, can you talk a little bit about like engaging the student in creating the student feedback tool process?
So I think what you're referring to is this idea of like having students be aware of their own learning. And okay, so yeah, so at the beginning, I call them wrappers, but for like any major assignment, they have to, after the assignment, they do like, this is what I hope to get out of this assignment. This is how I plan to be successful as I begin this assignment. And once the assignment is handed in, this is, and they receive the grade, this is what went really well for me. This is what I could do differently next time. And this is my like action plan moving forward. And that's been really helpful just to keep them engaged in their own learning process.
She is in front of a yellow wall with art.
Thank you.
Sean Johnson appears, then
Other thoughts as it relates to student feedback and how this tool can be supportive and engaging in that.
Some people talked about personally contacting students. I know Rob gave some examples. Would anyone else like to give some examples of when you would personally reach out to a student? Somebody was talking about reaching out to a student who had not turned in their work and finding out about their life. I'm not sure who wrote that, but can you?
That was me. I actually had some students. So I personally also suffer from anxiety and depression. And so I noticed that a student didn't turn in something for a week. And I was just like, you know what, that's 2 times. I've also had these problems where it was just like, a week was gone and I couldn't even, it was hard to notice. And so I just kind of reached out and I was just like, hey, something going on, how you doing? Just like I noticed that this was that you didn't turn this in, and I just wanted to check in. It wasn't necessarily even like, hey, you better get this stuff in by Sunday, or like, I'll give you the extension if you give me some sort of note. But yeah, I basically just contacted them, and then they wrote me. They're like, hey, yeah, I actually suffer from anxiety and depression. I am going to the doctor this weekend. I was on new meds, that sort of thing. And it was one of those things that was way beyond that person's control, and certainly needed certain accommodations and mercy in order to succeed in the class, because that was something that was temporary. That wasn't something that necessarily plagued them the entire course.
Yep, responding to students' personal life experiences is definitely something that comes up.
There was a couple of folks that have used Zoom polls to gather anonymous feedback and just get initial gut reactions. And also Google surveys. It sounded like there was an example as well in there of just some examples of if you wanted to gather things anonymously.
A person rests their chin.
I think we're at a good point to transition to group 1, though. Just throwing it out there. Unless there's anything else from our group.
Good. Now we can transition to our group. We focused on the Equity Language Guide, Chapter 2, Step 5. And we started off with just initial reactions to the tool and got really strong feedback.
Ruanda makes gestures.
And
Ruanda makes a point.
I don't know if anyone wants to share just their initial responses to the tool. Okay, I will share for you then. Folks felt that they really appreciated that we started with positionality, the specificity of the guide, and really appreciated the suggestions and the reflective questions. So that was confirming. And folks started thinking about where they could see this being used, which, as you all know, was very heartening for me. Any other initial reactions to the tool before we move into the Equity Language Guide specifically? Okay, I'll let Ray lead us through that.
Thanks. So we had a couple of specific questions that we asked folks. One is, how could you see the Equity Language Guide informing creation and revision of equity-minded and asset-based instructional materials in their own context? And so I would just ask a couple of you to come off mute and share out your responses on how you could use this Equity Language Guide and some thoughts that you had about the Equity Language Guide as well.
H. Ray Keith smiles.
Looks like Anne, you were going to respond. We'll give her a moment.
Anne Gray, she, her, hers.
I have a barking dog,
Okay.
so I apologize. But one of the things that I mentioned is that it definitely helps with shared understanding. But how I see it being used is using this as a foundational language guide, and then developing it further with community input, so that it becomes part of the language that the community is using, that our community is using.
Great, thanks, Anne. Yeah, I think it's important to think about, and Tynan and Rwanda, all of you can chime in, but how do we use this tool, and like Anne said, to be able to develop something that's meaningful to their own community, and using that as a guide.
Michelle Breaker appears.
I was kind of excited because last week we're working on our new math pathways in Connecticut, and someone had worked on the course descriptions for the support courses. And they say, oh, this course will be for students who always struggled in math and didn't like math and didn't do well in high school. And, I'm like, okay, this is an excellent opportunity to put this language to use. And because I just attended something by the Dana Center on the same, equity-minded language. So it was a good experience for me to finally see it in action, and to get others on the same page.
Great.
Everyone agreed it was bad, but how do you fix it?
Right. Thanks, Michelle.
H. Ray Keith appears.
Yeah, it's like once you start going down the deficit
Ruanda speaks, gesturing.
Slippery slope.
Ruanda gestures with her hand.
It's hard to, it's hard to come back from, but I'm so glad that you all recognized it as, this, how would, if a student, I always think, and one of the tests that Estella Ben-Simone talks about too is if a student read it, what you were writing about them, how would they feel? And that's how we should write, and sometimes we are right. Sometimes we do write things, for students in that deficit language. But just, always to look at that student perspective of how you're portraying them, how you're characterizing them, and then look at it for that welcoming and validation.
I was wondering if somebody has like an upcoming assignment or an upcoming experience where they feel like this tool is just what was ordered, where it's like a really good match to have like a preventive way as the materials are created for the experience or the assignment, to use this to make sure that it reaches, that it's equity minded, that it reaches the audience it's meant to reach, etc.
Scene change.
I would say in that same example, we're developing these new co-rec courses.
Yes, that's
and,
what
at the beginning of it and looking into developing the materials, and I think that'll be very useful.
Text, Sarah Kivelson.
Do others have something similar upcoming where, how like advertisers, they're really good at saying, oh, what can we create that, people will need? Does anyone see this filling an immediate need that's right around the corner for you?
So one of the classes that I teach is nutrition, and it can be a very tight rope to walk, in particular because you're actually identifying people as, part of an overarching group, unfortunately, right? And so you can say things like, okay, so this particular group of people actually does have a propensity for this particular thing. And so the wording for everything, especially for assignments, can get very, it can be a very big thing to maneuver around. And so whenever I'm making projects, like I actually have the students analyze themselves instead of analyze, like not necessarily say like, oh, like, I'm judging myself on my food, but I'm judging myself on like whether or not I'm analyzing this person, which happens to be you, correctly. But taking this particular tool and then kind of reevaluating how I'm asking those questions and making sure that they're not necessarily so frank. Because in order to, avoid this, what I tend to do is very short, very concise, like scientific
Diploma on the wall.
sort of questions, but I do think that it dehumanizes the assignment and it makes it a little bit less personalized. So I can certainly use this to help guide me in that.
Yeah. Thanks, Caitlin. A couple of our colleagues shared in our groups that this tool would be a great tool to use with a community of practice or faculty learning communities.
Ray Keith gestures.
That was Margaret. And then Patty mentioned that they have a cohort of faculty working on an adjunct shell this summer, and that this would be a great tool that they could use. to support their adjunct instructors as they are developing and designing course curriculum. Great. So then our next question is, what would you need to put the guide into practice to use it purposefully and intentionally? And so if anyone could share out a response on that. I know on our Jamboard, one said that it's available, that it's free, that we can access it, but also thinking about can there be some training around this and how to actually use the tool in a meaningful way.
Looks directly at the camera and speaks.
So what are some other thoughts about how you can use this tool to guide your practices in purposeful and intentional ways?
H. Ray Keith looks toward the camera.
And I'm not sure if Robin's still here. I want to see if Robin would like to share out if she's still here, because she was very interested in implementing this tool as soon as possible.
The scene cuts between H. Ray Keith and Rwanda Garth McCullough.
I don't think she's, I didn't see her name.
No, she's still here, but I don't know if she's with us.
Okay.
She's still on.
Other thoughts? Anne also said this tool could be useful for instructional designers as well.
White fireplace behind him.
Ray, I think you muted yourself mid-sentence.
Oh, sorry. And mentioned that this could also be a useful tool for instructional designers.
Quick scene change.
If I can call someone out, Sarah Koresh, do you think this could be useful with your open education resource work?
Hi, I feel called out, but I'm happy to jump in because when I heard instructional designers, I was like, yes, that's me.
Name, Sarah Kresh.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a useful tool. I think there's a lot of practical information that I might like for my population of faculty to pick out, you know, some aspects. One of the issues that we have
Name, Sarah Kresh, she, they.
That in our school and in faculty development, I think maybe in centers for teaching and learning generally is that you don't necessarily have the time to work with faculty on a process that's going to be multiple weeks. So for me, I do see, like in some of the tools that have been shared, I see the vision of having it be a deep and long, like a sort of longer process of reflection. But I just think in my context, it's not always practical, you know. So sometimes I can see myself having to pull out certain things. I think that the glossaries, the language is extremely helpful, and you know, something we can refer to right away on a punctual basis with faculty. So that's great. I also really liked there was a sample survey in chapter 3. And so again, that's something where we might, you know, invite faculty to pick one of those questions to include in their mid-semester feedback survey. So there's a lot of great stuff. Envisioning how to implement it as a whole is a little harder. So I don't know, maybe some recommendations for how it can be implemented on a sort
text,
of
Sarah Kresh, she, they.
Not piecemeal, for that. I'm just missing a better word, but
Oh, that's great.
like
that's
what
great.
pieces you can pick out for certain contexts or for certain goals would be helpful too.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to open up the space for some questions that you might have for us.
I would just like to respond to what Sarah said about, you know, being able to use it modularly. And I think that's how we designed it, so that you could pick. I mean, like you said, rarely do we have time. I mean, hopefully you'd have a community of practice that you can run through the whole process with, but we definitely wanted it to be that you could modularized, and so where you would pick. And I like that idea of maybe in version 2 or version 3, we have like, for this, we recommend, focusing here or focusing there, because we don't want it to be so overwhelming that it doesn't get used. And know that, everyone's at a different place. And so you want it, I always think that whenever you're doing culturally responsive, equity minded work, it needs to be tiered, right? Like there's some of us who've done the introspection work and probably don't need the racism 101 and the who am I. And there's some that this is the first time they're thinking about these questions in this way. And so where you start and where you go in depth and can vary and needs to vary for you to be responsive to your context. But we had a question that I wanted to share in our room as well. Someone asked, can we use this guide? So I want to make sure, yes, I want to make it clear before we close out here. You can use this guide. And I just asked two things. One, that you make it clear that it's a draft, but and that folks should, expect some updates, but it's linked, it's live on the Every Learner Everywhere website. And the other thing that I ask is that if you do use it, please let us know how it lands, how you use it. One thing that we definitely want to add for in the next versions are examples. So exactly what Michelle was talking about, like seeing that pre-post math pathways description, Michelle, I think would be very powerful to add to the guide, so people can start seeing their practices and their resources and how it can be. So I will just put a plug in. Please send all examples and updates to Teaching and Learning at Achieving the Dream.
Text if year.
Keep us posted and know that we are available for workshops and training on the tool, and have, can work with you to build out a service that meets your specific needs and goals at your institution. So again, the same email and
text virtual conference.
I think we have time for maybe one question, if anyone has a question. One more question.
I was just going to add a way I kind of see using this. I'm going to talk fast because I know this is going to close out soon. I think about like my chemistry course group, where we have maybe 5, 6, 7 instructors all teaching one class, like 151. And that involves, using OER resources, using making up laboratories and everything like that. I think this is a great way for small course groups to kind of start to evaluate their own course and ways to improve like departmental standards within course shells. And in particular, I do think that the reflection in the beginning is very important, because it allows each individual to really think about where they can best add to the group based on defining their identities and their histories. What I might like to see is a little bit more kind of added commentary or added thoughts about like, hey, think about things like, did you grow up from a fairly poor family? Did you rely on a lot of scholarship money to go to school? Did you work during school? Do you have mental health disorders that help you understand people that are under a tremendous amount of anxiety, depression, or stress? Those types of things can also add a lot to the conversation, even outside of, hey, what's your position in terms of your ethnicity? What's your position in terms of other factors as well? And so it's good to keep in mind that everybody brings a little something to that conversation, but I think it's also good for people to pin down what they should focus on in terms of contributions.
H, a person appears in the upper right corner.
And I think that's time.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. That was excellent.
That's a wrap.
Thank you all for joining us today and contributing to this conversation. And we are going to take your recommendations and your thoughts very seriously. And then just wanted to share some upcoming events. We have our webinar, Operationalizing Equity, our final webinar series on May 4th, which is Democratizing Learning Environments. And then we have our K-12 Partnership Institute, which is going to be an in-person conference, June 28th through the 30th. And that'll focus on dual enrollment, early college, and equity.
Text scan here.
Thank you all and enjoy the rest of the Institute.
Yes, and thank you, presenters. Go if ATD collab. It was a pleasure to work on this tool with you, and I'm just so excited that it's gone live and folks are excited to use it. Have a great day.
The words thank you written in different languages in a map of the world. Danke, dank, thank you gracious, shukran, AC8010 merci.
Alrighty, I should